All season long, y'all have been telling me that Tom Brady is the sole reason for the Patriots' 2 decades of success. Magically, now that he has said something that has hurt your feelings, all that goes out the window and the goalpost moves again. But I get it. If someone was kicking my ass for 2 decades, I'd want to get my lick back too. And welcome back, everybody, to the BKA Beloved podcast. I'm your host, BKA Beloved. On today's show, we got the head coach chopping block tears. How real are the Denver Broncos? And the deeper, darker criminal link as to why Zach Wilson is still a New York Jet. But first, so last week I recorded early because, Thanksgiving, got to spend time with the family and all that fun stuff. Next day, on my usual recording day, Tom Brady, greatest quarterback ever, greatest football player ever. Quick background, I'm a Patriots fan if you didn't know that already, so obviously I feel that way. Goes on to the Stephen A. Smith show and says the following quote. And I'm going to get you the exact quote because people have been messing this up. I think there's a lot of mediocrity in today's NFL. I don't see the excellence I saw in the past, Brady says. Now that's usually where the quote stops. In most outlets, that's where it stops and no one goes beyond that, right? Let me finish the quote. I think the coaching isn't as good as it was. I don't think the development of young players is as good as it was. I don't think the schemes is as good as they were. The rules have allowed a lot of bad habits to get into the actual performance of the game. So I think the product, in my opinion, is less than what it has been. Now, before we get to the actual merit of that quote, I have to defend my GOAT real quick because a lot of y'all got my GOAT fucked up. First and foremost, all season long, y'all have been telling me that Tom Brady is the sole reason for the Patriots' 2 decades of success. Magically, now that he has said something that has hurt your feelings, all that goes out the window and the goalpost moves again. But I get it. If someone was kicking my ass for 2 decades, I'd want to get my lick back too. So let's start piecing through the slander that's been thrown in my GOAT's way one by one, shall we? First of all, the rules point. The most common thing I've heard is, well, Tom, all those safety rules are passed to protect you. Complete and utter bullshit, and I got the facts to prove it. Ladies and gentlemen, would you like to know the amount of health and safety rules that were passed because of Tom Brady? 1. Uno. Singular rule. And I will tell you exactly what it is. In the year 2009, the Tom Brady rule was passed. In 2008, week 1, around the 3rd or 4th quarter, this is a very traumatic memory for me, after the Patriots' 16-0 season where they ended up losing to the New York Giants in the Super Bowl, Bernard Pollard of the Kansas City Chiefs launched himself into Tom Brady's knee, knocking him out for the entire season. So the following offseason, the league passed the Tom Brady rule, quote unquote, which says, and I quote, this is directly from the rule book, if a defender lunges or rolls at a quarterback's lower legs or delivers a hit with his helmet or shoulder, as Pollard did to Brady, he will be flagged. Fun fact, the same thing happened to Carson Palmer in the 2006 playoffs. Roughly 3 years earlier, ask Chad Johnson or Ocho Cinco how he feels about how that happened. Completely ruined their season and probably his best Super Bowl chance. So, next question probably is, so where'd the other health and safety rules come from? Glad you asked. 2017, week 6, Aaron Rodgers is sacked by Anthony Barr of the Minnesota Vikings. Anthony Barr lands on Aaron Rodgers at a weird angle, breaks Aaron Rodgers' collarbone, and Aaron Rodgers proceeds to miss the rest of the season. Following offseason, the NFL implemented a rule that states, and I quote, to protect the quarterback, players can no longer land on top of quarterbacks with all or most of their body weight while the passer is in a defenseless posture. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you tell me which one of those rules are more harmful towards defensive players trying to get a quarterback down. Matter of fact, if you've never tried to tackle anyone in your life, don't even try to answer. You're not qualified. I will answer this for you. You are asking 250 to 300 pound men to attempt to bring another grown man down against their will, while simultaneously in the process of getting this man down, shift their body weight in a way that stops them from landing on aforementioned grown man. You tell me which one's harder. Both of those are roughing the passer penalties, by the way. And now this is the main thing, the number one thing that has led to health and safety rules and how they are officiated now in the year of our Lord 2023. 10 years ago, in 2013, the NFL settled a lawsuit. The exact number is $765 million for a concussion lawsuit settlement. That following offseason, all the health and safety rules related to head-to-head collisions were passed. Defenseless receiver, hitting the running back in the hole with your head, all of those things were passed. You notice how those last two things have nothing to do with the words Tom or Brady? Oh, but sure. Blame Tom Brady for everything. Just put it all on him. Now that we got that point out the way, let's move on to Alex Smith. Now, I was going to come on here and fire the chopper at Alex Smith, but he doesn't deserve that. He's been through enough, right? And plus, I get it. I'm entering into the sports media game myself, and if you know a little bit of how sports television works, in pre-production meetings or sometimes in between commercials, when they're going to approach a certain topic, they go to all the panelists and say, who has said take on what topic? They don't give the whole word for word thing, but they give like the general gist of what they're about to say. And you can tell especially that's what happened in this case, because immediately when they come from commercial on NFL Countdown that morning, the host goes straight to Alex Smith on the Tom Brady topic and says, Alex, how do you feel about Tom Brady speaking on the mediocrity of the league? I'm going to paraphrase it because I didn't feel like getting the exact quote in front of me. It was just going to piss me off again. Something to the effect of, he played in the least competitive division in football for 2 decades. What does he mean mediocrity? Of course, I disagree with his statement. Again, I get it. The producers want the most salacious take. If you've seen how ESPN gets down the past decade or so, you know they're going for the most salacious take to create the most headlines, get the most engagement. That is their business model now. And it's not just ESPN. Every sports network, every sports content creator, except me, because apparently I'm hustling backwards. Everybody in the game, that's how they get down. So Alex Smith, I get it. This is the most we have talked about Alex Smith since he broke his leg. Damn it, I said I wasn't going to bring up nothing bad. Anyways, that's not even bad. That literally happened. But to Alex Smith, I say, hey, Alex, buddy, Tom Brady was in the AFC East for 19 years. Damn near 2 decades. If the other 3 teams in the division can't get their shit together in 2 decades, how the fuck is that Tom's fault? What they gotta do with him? Is he the GM? Is he the owner? Is he in the scouting department looking for guys? I'm not gonna sit here and argue the merit of how good the AFC East was my entire life and the length of Tom Brady's entire run, because that's a pointless argument. And I don't argue the merit of Tom Brady's career and trying to validate his accomplishments, because that's dumb. I don't need to do that. His career speaks for itself. The team that has the most rings, that has the most Super Bowl victories in the NFL in the history of the league is whatever team Tom Brady's on. Tom Brady has 7 rings. Number 2 is a 2-way tie between the Steelers and the Patriots at 6 rings. We are talking about the most successful football player to ever live. You want to debate greatest or best or all that? That's cool. I know I'm biased. I'm a Patriots fan. I'm fully aware I'm biased. So y'all know where I stand. You have your opinion. Cool. But you can't argue success. And again, according to y'all, all season long, all this is because of him. So I bring up the success to say this. And this is where we can bring back his actual point that he was making. If there is anybody in the world who is qualified to make this point, it is Tom Brady. But his main point wasn't even about the players if you actually listen to what he said. I will read it again. I think the coaching isn't as good. I don't think the development of the young players is as good as it was. I don't think the schemes are as good as they are. Words are as clear as day. There's video evidence of them. There is no fat to either of those sentences. He said exactly what he meant. But of course, because nobody reads or looks for context, they saw the headline, Tom Brady says mediocrity in football. All you see is Tom Brady saw Tommy DeVito and was fed up. Or my personal favorite, Tom Brady saw the 2023 Patriots and he decided he's done with football, blah, 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 blah. Completely ignoring his actual point, which is about coaching and the way players are developed, which when you look at it from that standpoint, he is 1 1,000% correct. Coaches do not develop players anymore. They teach their system. The difference is subtle, but hear me out. I'll give you an example. It might get a little nerdy, but just try to follow along as best as you can. You know why Trey Lance didn't work in San Francisco? Because in the modern NFL, the way that training and OTAs and practice schedules are set up, Kyle Shanahan could not simultaneously develop Trey Lance as a passer and teach him the Shanahan system at the same time. What do I mean by that? Coaches teach their systems. They do not develop players. The problem is when you're trying to teach a system like Shanahan's and you're dealing with a quarterback like Trey Lance, who by all draft experts is as raw as they come. There's some steps that are missing before you could process a Shanahan system. Practices used to be somewhere in the area of 3 hours, sometimes 4, depending on how crazy your coach is. I heard somebody say practices in the NFL are now 1.5, 2 on a heavy day. For those of you that are familiar with how practice works, there's not a lot of individuals going on, not a lot of individual sessions. And this isn't just the NFL. This goes all the way down to high school. In fact, I'll take it even further. This isn't even just a football thing. Ask AAU basketball players and parents how they feel about player development over there. So how does that affect the actual play on the field, where Tom Brady starts talking about bad habits? Another example, we're starting to see a lot more motion in these offenses, right? Where they're sending receivers and tight ends and running backs in motion before the play starts. Why is that? Many reasons, but this is the main one. It helps the quarterback ID the coverage before the play starts. In theory, if the person guarding the receiver you sent in motion follows them all the way to the other side, it's man-to-man. If they don't follow at all, or they only follow to a point, it is a zone of some way, shape, or form. In theory, more often than not, that is the case. That helps the quarterback make his read before the play even starts. I'm really trying not to get too nerdy on this, but screw it, we're already here. So if the read is, all right, if it's man, I'm going to throw this backside slant immediately because I know my receiver could beat him inside. And if it's cover 2, I got to hold it and see if I can hit this post over top of the middle linebacker, right? They're thinking that immediately the moment their receiver goes in motion. They have predetermined where they are going with the ball before the ball is even snapped. The problem is, doesn't always work out that way. So when you see an interception a quarterback throws and you're wondering, how did he not see that guy? That he threw the ball directly into the linebacker, safety, or cornerback's chest. Because he didn't. He literally didn't. He didn't even think that person would be there because before the snap said this, and then after the snap said this. And before the snap happened, he already determined what was going to happen because his robot brain, because the coaches are trying to make all the decisions for them, said, hey, motion says this, coverage says this, you do this. Nothing beyond that. Quarterbacks are not taught how to ad-lib. This is why the top quarterbacks in the league, if you noticed, are all quarterbacks that are either mobile or know how to ad-lib. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, all know how to ad-lib, all of them. So even in the system that you teach them, they can still work outside of it in case shit don't work out. And they also can make the reads post-snap in case what happens before the snap doesn't happen. So in general, that's the best example I can come up with for what Tom Brady is actually saying when he says that the mediocrity is happening in the league. And also these concepts are not being taught very well as far as helping them identify things before the snap. There's also just like a quality of how these concepts are being taught. That is also an issue, which is why you have things like Frank Reich getting fired after 11 games. And as we'll get to later in this podcast, a lot more coaches are going to join him on the unemployment line very soon. Quick break, and then we're going to get to the NFL questions. All right, welcome back. NFL question section of the podcast. I don't know why I said it like that, but we're here. Fuck it. If you want to submit your questions, Monday morning, every week, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, at BKA Beloved. In the story, there'll be a picture asking you to leave your question. Leave your question, and you will hear it answered on the podcast, just like this. Is Bryce Young really that bad, or is he a product of his environment? So two things can be true. First, the Panthers are clearly a dysfunctional organization. Since David Tepper bought the franchise in 2018, they have had 6 different head coaches if you include the interims. For reference, that is twice as many head coaches as the Pittsburgh Steelers have had since black people have been allowed to vote. They've had 9 different starting quarterbacks since 2018. Since 2018, they have traded away their no doubt 2 best offensive players not named Cam Newton, Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, the second of which to get Bryce Young, and he would have been incredibly helpful in developing your young quarterback. Ask Justin Fields how helpful DJ Moore is right now. The second part is Bryce Young has his deficiencies. A lot of the things I liked about Bryce Young coming out have just flatly disappeared when he got to the league. Part of that is the development. Another part of that is some of those things didn't translate to the NFL the same way we thought it would. He was a lot more mobile in college. The escapability was a lot higher. It's very similar to the Baker Mayfield situation where it's, oh, you're college mobile. You're not NFL mobile. The arm strength looked a lot better in college. Not saying he's Patrick Mahomes, but he had a lot going on in college, right? Has not looked that way in the league. They don't take many deep shots in that offense. Granted, that leads to my next point. The receivers on this Panthers offense are problematic for many reasons. First of which, they are very, very slow. Very, very, very slow. Bryce Young's best quality is his ability to process information and to go through his route progressions, right? He's able to do it very fast. The problem with that is, in this offense, he goes through his route progressions faster than his receivers run the routes. You can literally see him if you watch it on film, looking where the receiver is supposed to be before the receiver gets there. The corner or the safety or linebacker, whoever, sees him looking there and is like, okay, guess he wants to throw the ball there. Closes down and he says, well, shit, guess I got to turn. And he turns that way. And this is where the offensive line comes into play because our offensive line play has been subpar too. Bryce Young's processing speed had to speed up because the pressure's on him almost immediately, and because he's 5'10", about $190, getting hit in the face by 300-pound men tends to be pretty painful. So he can't slow down his progressions because he doesn't have the protection to do so. And he can't go through them quickly because his receivers aren't fast enough for him to do so. He is in a bad situation. However, this is a results-based business. And if the Panthers still had that number 1 pick, he would be getting Josh Rosen for Caleb Williams right now. Straight up. Josh Rosen never got a real chance to develop as the Cardinals quarterback. It's damn near the same situation. Got in 1 year. Terrible situation around him. His coach, Steve Wilkes, who, funny enough, was the coach of the Panthers last year, who they should have stayed on for the coach. That story for another day. His coach, Steve Wilkes, got fired after a year. They fired him, brought in Cliff Kingsbury, had the number 1 pick, drafted Kyler Murray. We have never heard from Josh Rosen again. And again, if the Panthers had that 1 pick, that would be happening to Bryce Young. We can discuss whether that's fair or not. That is a different conversation, but that is what would happen. So to answer your question directly, it is, I'll try to do a 100% split. It is 85% the situation and the way he's being developed. It is 15% on Bryce Young being limited as far as the NFL talent. Here's the bad part about the 85%. It's not going to get better. I said this on a podcast a couple weeks back. There are only 2 quarterbacks in the entire history of the NFL who had their head coach fired after their rookie year and then got better with the new head coach. Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence. Jared Goff, Jeff Fisher got fired, who was perpetually mediocre, and at that point was just done. He was old, he was done, he was tired of coaching. Clearly, he ain't had the patience to raise a young quarterback, so he stopped doing it, right? They brought in Sean McVay the next year. Oh my God, Sean McVay, boy genius. He's fixed Jared Goff. They go to a Super Bowl 2 years later, 3 years later. Whenever they lost to the Patriots, lose to the Patriots, they end up shipping him out of there. You know the Jared Goff Rams story. Trevor Lawrence had Urban Meyer, who I know Frank Reich didn't last as long as him, but I was there for the Urban Meyer thing. Urban Meyer was the worst NFL coach in the history of NFL coaches. They brought in Doug Peterson, former Super Bowl champion. Oh my God, Trevor Lawrence does look like a generational quarterback prospect. Who would have known? Some people will argue example 3 is Peyton Manning, but one, his head coach didn't get fired after his rookie year. And also, this is just in general. and I got to move on because I'm way too long-winded on this. I would like for all of us to stop using Peyton Manning's development as an example for rookie quarterbacks. I just want us all to stop. I know he led the league in picks as a rookie. I'm fully aware. We all know. Peyton Manning was the golden boy, golden child quarterback from the second he looked at a football. From a physical attribute standpoint and from a talent standpoint, he is very literally the perfect quarterback and was destined for GOATness from the beginning. And it came pretty damn close. If not for Tom Brady, he probably would be the greatest quarterback ever. He came, again, pretty damn close. I have him at 3. Some people have him top 5, top 10. Regardless, he's very high on list. None of these quarterbacks are Peyton Manning. Bryce Young definitely ain't Peyton Manning, so please stop using him as a comparison. All right, thanks for the question. I got to move on. What took the Jets so long to bench Zach Wilson? This is a very multifaceted issue. First, we all saw Tim Boyle, right? Like, we all saw the Black Friday game. And immediately we all should have knew that was coming, because for you to be Zach Wilson's backup all this time, there's no way he was a good quarterback. There's no way. Because if he was lighting it up in practice all this time while Zach Wilson was stinking it up out there, the Jets locker room would have caused a mutiny. Everything else after that is speculation, rumor, and conjecture. None of this has been proven as fact, but it's been said enough times where I have to mention it here. Rumor has it they did not want to bring in another quarterback, say trading for Kirk Cousins, trying to trade for Ryan Tannehill if he was available, one of those level quarterbacks, because they didn't want to make it seem like they weren't committed to Aaron Rodgers long term for the future. If y'all remember, they basically sold their soul for Aaron Rodgers in the offseason. Brought in his offense coordinator. All of Hard Knocks was dedicated to him. Tim Boyle was on the team because he was Aaron Rodgers' drinking buddy in Green Bay. Next theory, either Woody Johnson, the owner, or Joe Douglas, the GM, really wanted this Zach Wilson thing to work. Because when you draft a quarterback in the top 5, especially at 2, you are uniquely motivated to make sure you are proven correct for drafting said quarterback. Even though Zach Wilson was the most predictable bust in the history of bust. Granted, the only good quarterback from that draft looks like it's Trevor Lawrence. Trey Lance, still a question mark, and I still have faith in Justin Fields, but most people don't. So at the current moment, Trevor Lawrence looks like the only good quarterback from that draft. The last theory is he played just well enough before the bye week to justify not moving on from him. Just well enough. Speaking of which, there's a New York radio host whose name escapes me right now. I wish I would have found it before I started recording, who got a lot of heat for saying, hey, maybe Zach Wilson shouldn't be going on vacation during the bye week. You should be locked in, buddy. They called him a madman. Oh boy, was he right. He has been basura since he got back from the bye week. Oh man, he could not have been more right. Whoever that man is, I apologize on behalf of all the people that slandered you. Pretty sure I didn't, but hey, I apologize because you were 1,000% right. Hopefully that answers your question. I think it's some combination of Tim Boyle was awful and the front office really wants Zach Wilson to work out so they could justify drafting him at 2. And the reason he ultimately got benched was not because Zach Wilson was the only problem with the offense for people that are weirdly trying to argue for Zach Wilson's honor right now, which is a very weird hill to die on, but whatever, your choice. Guys, when you have a defense as good as the Jets, you have to do something. You got to do something to prevent a mutiny in the locker room. They cannot continue to see the worst thing happening on the field continuously and not do a thing about it for all season long. If you remember last year when Zach Wilson got hurt, they bought in White Mike, or Mike White, who's now the backup for the Dolphins. They were wearing Mike White t-shirts. They had t-shirts made for a backup quarterback who wasn't even that good in the first place. You know what those t-shirts really meant? Thank God you're not Zach Wilson. And they bought him back to the team anyways. That was mistake number 1. Bringing in Rodgers, they should have immediately shipped Zach Wilson out regardless. But again, ownership / GM really wanted to make that pick work, so he's still on the roster. Thank you for the question. Are the Broncos actually going to sneak a playoff spot in the AFC, and will they do anything relevant if so? All right, so the Broncos are currently at the 9th seed. I think that the Steelers and Texans are locks for the 5th and 6th seed. So that leaves the 7th seed, where their competition is going to be the Bills, the Browns, and the Colts. The Bengals are a game out of being in that contention, but we saw Jake Browning, right? So we can go ahead and knock the Bengals off. Okay, we can move on from them. They own a tiebreaker over the Bills and the Browns because they beat them. And the Colts have Gardner Minshew as a quarterback, and Jonathan Taylor is on his way to the IR because he's having thumb surgery today. Well, yesterday by the time you're hearing this. Their remaining schedule is as follows. The Houston Texans, the Chargers twice, the Lions, New England, and then it ends in Vegas. They are 6-6, and I think 10 wins gets that 7 seed. Do you count 4 wins in those last couple games? Split with the Chargers, maybe. 1, definitely beat New England. We should be tanking, so definitely beat New England. That's 2. I don't think they beat Houston. Can't think. Maybe they beat the Lions? Jared Goff doesn't respond to pressure / turning the ball over well, so maybe they beat the Lions. Who knows? So they would have to beat Vegas for that last game. So I got 3 in a possible. That's the best answer I got for you. So it's a strong maybe, and it depends on how you feel about the Lions. Me personally, I'm out on the Lions. I'm out. We'll get to them later on my power rankings, which I'll end the episode with, but I'm out on the Lions. I'm out. We have another Broncos question that immediately follows this. Do you think the Denver Broncos are a Super Bowl contender? And this question right here, the first thing that came to my mind, I'm pretty sure I DM'd the person who asked this question immediately. That's just way too much dip on your chip, my brother. That's just way too much dip. Because let's be honest about the Broncos for a second. Sorry to rain on your parade, Broncos Nation, after just saying you might make the playoffs. I'm sorry to bring it down, but I got to be honest with the people. Just like Russell Wilson was getting too much blame when the Broncos were bad, he's now getting too much credit now that they're good. The reason the Broncos were bad early in the season was because their defense was porous, thus allowing 70 points, right? The reason they're good now is because during this 5-game winning streak, they've created 15 or 16 turnovers. That's 3 to 4 a game over the course of this winning streak. Russell Wilson has managed to not throw an interception during the time of this game, and all they're asking him to do is to make plays on 3rd down and not turn the ball over. For all of you that are arguing Russ is back to his true form, Russell Wilson was on his way to the Hall of Fame when he was a Seattle Seahawk. The role he has now with the Broncos, does that sound like a Hall of Fame quarterback to you? I thought so. So instead of trying to throw the parade, Russell Wilson is back game, let's apologize to Vance Joseph. That's where our attention should really be. Even I called for his job on this podcast. I hate calling for black coaches' jobs, but I felt like after you get 70 dropped on you, you shouldn't be allowed back on the plane. But goddamn it, the defense turned around, and so did their season. But yeah, no. Playoffs, no go. Let's, hypothetically speaking, let's say they get that 7 seed. As currently constructed, their playoff path would be this. Wildcard round, they're going to go to 2-seed Kansas City, and they have to win. They split with Kansas City this year. Yeah, that's the first win they got against Kansas City since Obama was in office. So what's the chances you get another one on the road? But let's say that you do and pull the biggest upset ever. You now have to go into Baltimore and win there. Ask the Seahawks and Lions how walking into M&T Bank Stadium works out for the other team. But let's say again that you magically pull that off. The Jaguars, the Dolphins, or the Steelers, more than likely, are going to be waiting for you in the AFC Championship. Come on now. The chip is broken. You done broke the chip. Way too much dip on that chip. Respect to the Broncos. Great winning streak. Hopefully you guys make the playoffs. But come on now. Super Bowl, relax. Thanks for the question. Does Ron Rivera get fired after another performance like that? All right. So if Washington was going to fire Ron Rivera during the season, they would have by now. For y'all that are new, I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, 15 minutes away from where the Washington Commanders play football, right? The buzz in the area was he might be gone after the Bears game. As we can see, he is still employed. He just got embarrassed by the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, which is a yearly tradition around here. So I don't know why that will be the one that will get him fired, but sure. My theory is twofold. One, Ron Rivera is a cancer survivor, and Washington has new ownership. Firing a cancer survivor in the middle of the season, not the greatest headline in the world. So they're going to wait till the offseason on that one. Plus, you got to remember with this new ownership, they didn't hire anybody in that building. From the GM to the coach to the people working concessions, they didn't hire anyone. So I think this offseason, they're going to burn the whole thing to the ground. Everyone's fired. Players, we'll see who gets traded, we'll see who doesn't. But a lot of people are losing their job in Washington this offseason. So to answer your question, he is going to get fired. That's going to happen. Just not during the season. Thanks for the question. Do you think it's time for the Pats to move on from Bill? As I mentioned many times before, I am a Patriots fan, so this question hits very close to home. And you just will not get me to say that Bill Belichick should no longer be the coach of the Patriots. You're not going to get me to say it. I almost got there after the Germany game. I was in a very dark place. Almost got there, but I'm not there anymore. Patriots fans that are campaigning to get Bill Belichick fired, I got to say this to y'all. You spoiled bastards. You spoiled brats. You have enjoyed 20 years of the greatest run in the history of sports, not even the NFL, the history of sports, the greatest run ever. But after 4 seasons post Tom Brady, you want to kick this man out the door. Okay. Can I break down these 4 seasons for y'all? Season 1, the Cam Newton COVID year, which was going great before Cam Newton got COVID, and he wasn't the same after that. And nothing was right during that season because the world was shut down and nothing was functioning properly. Okay. 1 bad year, ended up getting like the 15th pick in the draft. With said 15th pick, we draft Michael McCorkle-Jones, better known as Mac. Mac Jones' rookie year, oh my God, we make the playoffs. Granted, got slaughtered by the Bills. Absolutely slaughtered by the Bills, right? But that's also the same year that the Bills lost the 13-second game to the Chiefs. That Bills team was potentially a Super Bowl team, and if not for those 13 seconds, might have made it. The following 2 years are the objectively terrible years. I have no defense for the next 2 years. The Matt Patricia Joe Judge year, which, as much as I have my complaints about Mac Jones, I think this year is single-handedly responsible for breaking this man because the malpractice of hiring 2 people who have never coached offense before to be responsible for the development of your second-year quarterback is terrible, awful, inexcusable, one of the worst decisions a head coach has ever made. However, winning 6 Super Bowls should give you the leeway to make a terrible decision. So that season goes to hell. Okay, coming into this year, where anybody with a brain knew that the Patriots were going to suck this year. We all knew it. Everyone knew it. This year has been awful. Awful. Terrible. We are in line for the number 3 pick right now. But here's the doozy. Bill Belichick is in a lose-lose situation as far as the public concerned. If he starts winning games and fucks up our chances of getting the number 1 pick, the Patriots fan base is going to be pissed and going to want him fired. If he keeps losing games and the Patriots continue to look terrible, they're going to want him to be fired. It's a lose-lose situation. And here's what I think is the main reason why, specifically the New England area, and the media is really pushing to get Bill out of there. Bill Belichick has been a complete and total dick to the people doing his press conferences his entire career. That shit's real cute. When you're winning Super Bowls, it's adorable. Oh my God, look at his short answers. We're on to Cincinnati. Ha ha ha. When you bench your starting quarterback 5 times in the same season, but you keep starting him in the next game, not as cute anymore. We want some goddamn answers. So after 2 decades of Bill giving you his ass to kiss, yeah, now that he's under some heat, he hasn't earned a lot of goodwill with the people in the media. So yeah, they pushing to get him out of there. But I flatly disagree. I think if you win 6 chips and give us 2 decades of unprecedented success, you deserve to suck for at least 5 years. At least 5. I don't think that's asking for too much. 20 years of greatness, 5 years of sucking. And if you want to be honest, we only really sucked for 2. But here's why I don't want him to be fired. However, I want his hands off the steering wheel a bit. Bill Belichick is going into his mid-70s. My grandmother's in her mid-70s. I love you, Grandma, because my grandma does listen to some of the things I do. I mean, no disrespect by this. Love you, Grandma. We have not let my grandmother behind the wheel of a car in about a decade. Bill Belichick is running every aspect of the Patriots organization as we speak. So I can't in good conscience continue to watch him be the GM and coach of this team at the same time. And if you think about it, the real problems with Bill Belichick has been him as a GM. Clearly can still coach. However, is Bill Belichick willing to say, okay, after 23 years of me making all the decisions about personnel and coaching, I am now going to give the personnel decisions to somebody else, and I'm just going to deal with it and coach who they give me. History says there's no way in hell that's happening. And if that happens, there's no way you can bring Belichick back. He can't continue to make all the personnel decisions and coach. That's just impossible. Last point, and then I'll move on because this podcast is way longer than I thought it would be. And this is, I think, the second to most important point. The GM part is the most important point. Second to most important point. Who the fuck wants to be the next coach behind Bill Belichick? The next quarterback we got behind Tom Brady was Cam Newton, who literally had no other options. Who wants to follow Belichick? After 2 decades of the most successful coaching run we've ever seen, who wants to be the guy to follow that? There's no way you're going to be good enough. Unless you are another Bill Belichick, who we already had. Let me tell you how fickle Boston sports fans are. Because if mysterious new head coach comes in next year and he sucks, flat out awful, you know what the first thing they're going to say? Man, I miss Bill Belichick. We would have never dealt with this under Bill Belichick, as if this current year never happened. Thanks for the question. Don't fire Belichick, the coach. Fire Belichick, the GM, though. He got to go. All right, the now weekly power rankings. I did not know it was going to be a weekly segment, but since it got so many panties in a bunch, I figured why not? Let's just do this every week and make my life more fun. Starting with, as usual, the first 2 out. This isn't an 11-12 situation. It's a tie between the Broncos and the Colts. We did a whole section on the Broncos before this. If you're listening to the whole podcast, feel free to go re-listen. If you're watching this in its own individual video, go watch the Broncos video. But in summary, I think they might end up getting a 7 seed. They're on a 5-game winning streak. But let's see a little bit more before we put them in the top 10. And the Colts, technically they're the 7th seed in the AFC right now. The same thing I'm giving the Broncos credit for maybe doing, the Colts are actually doing right now, so it didn't seem fair to have the Broncos there and not the Colts. However, their quarterback is Gardner Minshew, and Jonathan Taylor is on the IR, or not IR, I'm sorry. He's going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks because of a thumb injury, which means he'll miss 3 games. He'll be terrible in another game. He'll be the game after that, and then he'll be back to Jonathan Taylor. So that's 4 to 5 games of either not having him or subpar. So, not looking great for their playoff chances. All right, let's get into the list. Can I get my graphic, please? Thank you, future Kevin, who's editing this video. Number 10, new entry to the list. I got the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the greatest show on turf, they are not. However, after firing Matt Canada, they now have a professional offense. Not great. They only put up 16 points against the Bengals, whose defense, not awesome. However, they have a professional offense now. So pair with a pretty damn good defense on the other side. I think they're going to lock that 5th seed up sooner rather than later. And of course, they're 2 wins away from a winning record because Mike Tomlin. Number 9, I got the Houston Texans. I know I should probably drop them lower. I had them at 8 last week before they lost to the Jaguars. Don't care. I still think that they're going to end up getting that 6th seed. CJ Stroud, still awesome. D'Amico Ryans, still a great coach. The Jaguars were just really good that day. And the kicker missed the field goal in a dome where the only wind was the air conditioning. Number 8, I got the Detroit Lions. Now, yearly tradition, the Lions getting embarrassed on Thanksgiving. However, it confirmed some of my fraud suspicions that I had already going into that game, which stupidly I still picked them to win. Here's a real reason they're dropping to 8. Let's say the playoffs come, and Jared Goff has to stand across the field from the top quarterbacks in the NFC. Who are you taking Jared Goff over? Dak Prescott? Nope. Jalen Hurts? Hell no. Brock Purdy? Maybe. But when you start adding in the weapons that the Niners have, that elevates to a hell no. Number 7, same spot they were at last week, the Miami Dolphins. You beat Tim Boyle. Congratulations. They got the Ravens and the Cowboys on the schedule. We will talk then. Number 6, I got the Jacksonville Jaguars. Apparently, I was sleeping on the Jaguars. They are 5-1 versus teams that are 500 or better. 5 straight wins on the road. Trevor Lawrence, outside of one pick against the Texans, played pretty goddamn well in a game they needed to win to keep the lead in their division, and that's what great quarterbacks do. However, their starting left tackle is out for the rest of the season. Not great, but that pass rush is coming along real well. like what Josh Allen's doing on the other side. But black Josh Allen, the pass rusher. And Trayvon Walker, if you squint really hard, he almost looks like a number 1 overall pick. Almost. He's almost there. Number 5, I have the Dallas Cowboys. Dropped them 1 spot by no fault of your own. I'll explain when I get to number 4 pick. Slaughtered the Washington team like you do every Thanksgiving. Still love how Dak's playing. Still love how the defense is playing. Got a Defensive Player of the Year candidate with Deron Bland. Love it all. You just got you at 5 for a reason I'll explain right now. Number 4, I got the San Francisco 49ers. Niners fans, when you're right, you're right. Last week, I had the Niners at 5, and the fans were very upset. Very, very upset. Comments, DMs, mentions, very mad at me. Calling me every name in the book, and usually I'd give y'all my ass to kiss. However, the few of you that were civil brought up some great points. Most notably, the thing I called the Niners were frontrunners. To which the response was, you call us frontrunners, but we've beaten better teams than the Cowboys, including the Cowboys, and the 3 losses we had were all because our all-star team of stars are injured. We have all of our stars back. In arguable logic, I had nothing for that. Again, when you're right, you're right. And I got to admit when I'm wrong. I'm sure there's going to be some of you that's mad you're not number 1, number 2, or number 3, except number 4. Moving on. Number 3, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Got them at 3. Outside of Patrick Mahomes, guys, I think this offense is awful. I know they were able to pull something together. Rashid Rice shows some promise. Travis Kelce looked like 75% prime Travis Kelce. I don't know how sustainable that is. They fell down 14 points early to the Raiders, who they always beat. I think they only lost to them once in Patrick Mahomes' entire career. But I'm not just going to straight up tell you that the offense sucks and not give you some background why. Let me tell you why. I'm going to stat y'all down a little bit here. These stats are updated as of week 11 because that's just how Pro Football Reference does it. And they update it every Wednesday, which is the day this podcast drops. So take every stat I say with a grain of salt. They lead the league in receiver drops at 28. They are first in allowed quarterback hurries. They are second in allowed quarterback hits. They are fourth in allowed quarterback pressures. Would you like to know the 3 teams ahead of them? The Jets and the Giants, who have 3 injured quarterbacks between them and another one that got benched, and the Washington Commanders, who have the most sacked quarterbacks in football. Patrick Mahomes is the least quarterback in football because he is a magician. If he was 10% less mobile, he'd be getting lit up too. This defense is holding it together as best they can, but oh my God. Those offensive woes are going to bite them in the ass come playoff time, let me tell you. However, the rest of their schedule outside of Buffalo is a cakewalk, and who knows how bad the Buffalo situation is going to get from that point on. So we'll see. We'll keep them at 3 for now. Number 2, I got the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I'm not going to lie. I didn't love how the offense looked against the Chargers, who were the worst pass defense in the league. However, I will excuse it because it is the first game without Mark Andrews, who is their best receiver and their star tight end. Let the Chiefs lose Travis Kelce for a game. We'll see how that looks. Oh, wait, we have the answer already. Opening night against the Lions, where the Chiefs scored 20 points. How many points did the Ravens score? 20 points. Funny how that works. After watching the Browns get the ball ran down their throat by the Broncos, I don't care what the stats say, the Ravens have the best defense in football, created 4 turnovers against the Chargers, kept them under 300 yards, and even after Zay Flowers scored that touchdown, which all the nerds said that he shouldn't have, my response was, when you got a defense like the Ravens, the chance of the other team scoring 10 points in under 2 minutes are 0. Go ahead and score, Zay. Do your thing. My worry for the Ravens for the future, they have the hardest strength of schedule according to opponents' combined win percentage, which includes the Dolphins and the 49ers on that schedule. So if they end up with the 1 seed, they earn that shit. Number 1 should come as a surprise to absolutely nobody. The Philadelphia Eagles. Guys, I don't know what more to say about the Eagles that hasn't already been said. This team will find a way to win. You may not like it. It may not look pretty. You may have your complaints at the end, but they're winning. A 6-day span, they went into Arrowhead and beat Patrick Mahomes, which has only happened 8 times prior in Patrick Mahomes' entire career, in the rain, and they got it done over there. Sunday, overtime versus Josh Allen, who you can argue is the second best quarterback in the league. I disagree with you, but a lot of people say he is. Beat him too. And when it came to nut crunching time, when rubber met the road, and cliche to say that we need to win this game right now, Our guy Jalen Hurts came through. It's what he does. It's what he does all the time. Jalen Hurts is going to come through and find a way to win. He has lost 4 games in his last 36 as a starter. It's what they do. They win games. They continue to win games. If the Eagles are brought up in conversation, I don't know what will have to happen for me to say they're going to lose. Matter of fact, I lied. I do have the answer. If they don't have Lane Johnson's for the 49ers game, I don't know how they win that game. I'll be honest. That Niners pass rush versus a Lane Johnson-less offensive line, which all due respect to Jack Driscoll. Okay, we can go ahead and get rid of the graphic. This has just turned to a Eagles 49ers light preview. All due respect to Jack Driscoll, who was the starting right tackle for the Eagles when Lane Johnson got announced he was out before the Bills game. He played decently. He played pretty well, especially when you compare it to how he looked versus the Jets, which I'm not going to say he's the only reason they lost to the Jets, which how funny is it that the one loss on the Eagles schedule is to Zach Wilson and the Jets? I hope they go 16-1, just so at the end of the year, we can look back and be like, can you believe their one loss was to Zach Wilson, who's out of the league now? That's crazy. As good as Jack Driscoll is, he has not shut down Nick Bosa for 60 minutes the way Lane Johnson did in the NFC Championship good. He just isn't. And combine that with, all right, you got to block Nick Bosa, got to block Chase Young, got to block Armstead, got to block Javon Hargrave. What if Fred Warner blitzes? What if Greenlaw blitzes? Well, it's a lot going on that defense. And the Eagles have started very slow these last 2 first half. You cannot do that against the 49ers. I called them front runners earlier. They front run better than anybody. If you give them a lead early, you're not getting it back. So they better bring their big boy draws, their lunch pail, and whatever else they need to get the job done to Lincoln Financial so they could beat the 49ers that day. Because for whatever reason, they're not the favorite at home. Now, I'm not the biggest betting guy in the world. However, they're 10-1 against a team that they beat in the NFC Championship last year, which, all right, I really got to end this podcast, so I'll make this the last point. Instead of discrediting them for beating a team on their 4th quarterback of the year, how about we give them some credit for knocking out 3 quarterbacks in the game? Maybe it's because I grew up on a different era of football than some people, but back in my day, i.e. watching the 2000 Ravens as a wee little tyke, they were knocking out quarterbacks left and right, and they got NFL Films documentaries about it. And somehow we're holding it against the Eagles that they were able to do the same thing against the Niners? Come on now. We got to be fair about these things. Anyways, thank you for listening to this entirely too long podcast. Like, follow, subscribe at BKA Beloved on all platforms, and I'll see y'all again next Wednesday.